Hello, everyone. Good night. For your hope in me and to help me create better stories, tell me in the comments where and when you listen to my stories. And get ready to start the story by liking and subscribing. Chapter 1: The Gardens of Eleanor. Let us begin our journey softly, gently, as evening light fades over the ancient stones of Paris. Close your eyes if you wish, and imagine with me the world of long ago, a world of candlelight and whispered secrets, of great stone castles and gardens filled with the scent of roses. It is the year 1137, and in the warm countryside of Aquitaine, in the southwest of what we now call France, a remarkable young woman named Eleanor prepares for a wedding that will shake the foundations of European power. But we need not concern ourselves with rushing through her story. No, we shall let it unfold slowly, peacefully, like petals opening to the morning sun. Eleanor of Aquitaine. Let that name roll gently through your mind. Eleanor. It comes from the Occitan language, meaning the other Aenor, for she was named after her mother. She is 15 years old, and already she is the greatest heiress in all of France, perhaps in all of Europe. Her father, William X, Duke of Aquitaine, has recently died, and with his passing, Eleanor has inherited lands so vast that they make up nearly a third of modern France. Breathe deeply now and picture those lands. Aquitaine stretches from the Loire River in the north down to the Pyrenees Mountains in the south, from the Atlantic Ocean in the west to the Auvergne in the east. Imagine rolling vineyards where grapes hang heavy on the vine. Imagine coastal ports where merchants unload spices from distant lands. Imagine forests thick with oak and chestnut trees where deer move silently through the morning mist. Imagine fields of lavender stretching purple toward the horizon. All of this belongs to Eleanor. In her duchy, the culture is different from that of northern France. Here in the south, troubadours sing songs of courtly love, accompanying themselves on lutes and viols. The language spoken is Occitan, melodious and warm, quite different from the French of Paris. The people are more open, more given to pleasure and art. Women here have more freedom than their sisters in the north. They can own property, can inherit, can even rule in their own right. Eleanor has grown up breathing this air of relative freedom, and it has shaped her into someone extraordinary. She is tall for her time, with auburn hair that catches the light like copper. Her eyes are intelligent, observant, missing nothing. She has been educated in ways most women of her era are not. She can read and write in both Latin and her native Occitan. The language spoken is Occitan, melodious and warm, quite different from the French of Paris. The people are more open, more given to pleasure and art. Women here have more freedom than their sisters in the north. They can own property, can inherit, can even rule in their own right. Eleanor has grown up breathing this air of relative freedom, and it has shaped her into someone extraordinary. She is tall for her time, with auburn hair that catches the light like copper. Her eyes are intelligent, observant, missing nothing. She has been educated in ways most women of her era are not. She can read and write in both Latin and her native Occitan. She has studied music and mathematics, history, and philosophy. Her grandfather, William IX, was himself a troubadour, one of the first whose poems survive to this day. He sang of love and adventure, sometimes scandalizing the church with his earthly verses. That creative, but now, in the summer of 1137, Eleanor's life is about to change forever. King Louis VI of France has arranged for his son, also named Louis, to marry Eleanor. It is a brilliant political match. The young Prince Louis will gain Eleanor's vast territories, bringing them under the French crown. Or so everyone assumes. Let us pause here for a moment and simply breathe. In, slowly, filling your lungs with the imagined scent of those ancient gardens. Out, slowly, releasing any tension you may be holding. There is no hurry in our story. We have all the time in the world. The wedding takes place in the Cathedral of Saint-André in Bordeaux on a summer day. The great stone building stays cool even in the heat, its thick walls blocking out the fierce southern sun. Light streams through high windows, creating pools of color on the stone floor. The air smells of incense and beeswax candles. Eleanor wears a gown of the finest silk, brought along trade routes from Constantinople. It is a deep blue, the color of the Mediterranean at twilight, embroidered with golden thread in patterns of vines and flowers. Young Louis stands beside her. He is only 16 years old, just 1 year older than his bride. Where Eleanor is vibrant and commanding, Louis is quiet and pious. He had been destined for the church, raised in contemplation and prayer, until his older brother died in a riding accident. Suddenly thrust into the role of heir to the throne, Louis has not quite left behind his religious training. He is serious, devout, more comfortable with monks and manuscripts than with the pleasures of court life. Imagine the contrast between them. Eleanor, raised in the sensual culture of the South, where poetry and music fill the courts, where love is celebrated openly. Louis, raised in cold stone monasteries, where silence is virtue and pleasure is suspect. Already, the seeds of future discord are present, but on this wedding day, no one speaks of such things. The ceremony proceeds with ancient ritual. Latin words echo off the vaulted ceiling. The bishop blesses the union, speaking of duty and faith, of the sacred bond of marriage. Eleanor and Louis make their vows, their young voices steady and clear. And just like that, Eleanor becomes more than a duchess. She becomes the future queen of France. But before we follow Eleanor to Paris, let us linger for a moment in Aquitaine. Let us walk through those gardens she loves, for she will not see them again for many years. The gardens of Eleanor's palace in Poitiers are legendary. They were designed by her grandfather, that poet duke who believed in beauty above all things. Here, roses of every color bloom in careful patterns. There are red roses, their petals like velvet. White roses, pure as morning snow. Pink roses, blushing like dawn. Yellow roses, bright as butter in the sun. The fragrance is intoxicating, sweet and complex, different notes revealing themselves as you move through the garden. Between the roses, other flowers grow. Lilies, tall and elegant, their white trumpets turning toward the light. Violets, small and humble, hiding their purple blooms beneath heart-shaped leaves. Peonies, their blooms so heavy they nod toward the earth. Lavender, humming with bees in the afternoon heat. Jasmine, climbing up trellises, releasing its perfume, especially in the evening. There are herbs too, both culinary and medicinal. Rosemary, woody and fragrant, sacred to remembrance. Thyme, tiny-leafed and aromatic, favored by the bees. Sage, with its gray-green leaves and healing properties. Mint, eager and invasive, kept in check by careful gardeners. Chamomile, with its apple-scented flowers, used to calm and soothe. And there are trees, fig trees, their broad leaves providing shade, their sweet fruit ripening in the summer heat. Olive trees, ancient and gnarled, their silver leaves shimmering in the breeze. Pomegranate trees with their leathery scarlet flowers and jewel-like fruit. Orange trees, brought from the south, their blossoms perfuming the spring air, their fruit glowing like small suns in winter. Between the planted beds, paths wind in graceful curves. Some are made of small white pebbles that crunch softly underfoot. Others are paved with flat stones, worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. Here and there, benches offer places to rest, to contemplate, to converse. Small fountains splash and murmur, their water catching the light, providing a constant, soothing sound. Eleanor has spent countless hours in these gardens. As a child, she played hide and seek among the hedges with her sister Petronilla. As a young woman, she walked here with her tutors, discussing philosophy and poetry. She has sat on these benches in the evening, listening to troubadours practice their songs. She has picked roses and woven them into crowns. She has tasted figs still warm from the sun and oranges so sweet their juice ran down her fingers. These gardens represent something important about Aquitaine, about the culture Eleanor comes from. They represent a love of beauty for its own sake, a belief that pleasure and art and learning can coexist with piety and duty. They represent a more Mediterranean sensibility, influenced by the proximity to Spain and the lingering effects of Roman culture. They are civilized and sensual at once, ordered yet abundant. In the north, in Paris, gardens exist, but they are different. More austere, more controlled, useful plants rather than purely decorative ones. The climate is harsher too, the winters longer and darker. The culture is more severe, shaped by different traditions, different priorities. When Eleanor leaves Aquitaine for Paris, she is not just traveling north. She is crossing an invisible border between two different worlds. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Let us return to that garden in Poitiers on a summer evening, just after the wedding. Eleanor walks alone, taking a moment of solitude before the celebration feast. Her elaborate gown whispers against the pebbled paths. Her mind is full of thoughts of the future. She is intelligent enough to understand what this marriage means politically. Her lands will be administered by Louis, by his advisors, by the French crown. Will she have a voice in how they are governed? Will she be treated as a queen in her own right, or merely as a vessel through which power passes from her father to her husband? She pauses by a fountain, watching the water catch the last rays of the setting sun. Somewhere in the garden, a nightingale begins its evening song. The air cools slightly, bringing relief from the day's heat. The scent of jasmine grows stronger as darkness approaches. Eleanor breathes it in, committing this moment to memory. Part of her knows, with that intuition that sometimes precedes knowledge, that her life is about to become very complicated indeed. But for now, let us leave Eleanor in her garden, surrounded by roses and the sound of falling water. Let us drift, as one drifts towards sleep, to Paris to see what awaits her there. Paris in 1137 is not yet the grand city it will become. The population is perhaps 20,000 people, clustered mostly on the Ile de la Cité, the island in the middle of the Seine River. The royal palace is there too, on the western end of the island. It is a complex of buildings, some of stone, some still of wood, built over several generations without any grand unified plan. There are towers and halls, chapels and storerooms, courtyards and gardens, much smaller and plainer than those Eleanor left behind in Aquitaine. The palace is dark, not dark in a metaphorical sense, though that too will prove true, but literally dark. Windows are small, covered with oiled parchment or thin sheets of horn that let in light but not weather. Glass windows are rare, expensive, found only in churches and the grandest buildings. Inside, rooms are lit by candles and rushlights. Smoke lingers in the air, finding its way slowly out through vents in the ceiling, or simply seeping through cracks in the walls. The floors are covered with rushes, dried plants that are spread out to provide insulation and absorb dirt. These are changed periodically, but even fresh rushes hide things. Dropped food, spilled wine, the bones from meals, all disappear into the rushes until they are swept out and replaced. The smell is complex. A mixture of wood smoke and unwashed bodies, cooking food and damp stone. The sweet herbs sometimes mixed with the rushes and the ever-present mustiness of a building that never quite dries out. It is into this environment that Eleanor arrives in the late summer of 1137. She brings with her a train of followers from Aquitaine, ladies-in-waiting, knights, servants, advisors. She brings fine furnishings, tapestries to hang on the cold stone walls, books and musical instruments, the trappings of the more refined court culture she knows. She brings, too, her own strong will and her own ideas about how a queen should behave. The contrast between Eleanor and the French court is immediate and striking. The northern nobles find her too bold, too outspoken. Women of the French court are expected to be modest, retiring, concerned mainly with prayer and needlework. Eleanor, in contrast, expresses opinions about politics and warfare, about art and literature. She surrounds herself with troubadours and poets. She dresses in the more colorful, elaborate style of the South. She even rides horseback astride like a man, rather than using the more modest side saddle preferred in the North. The French courtiers whisper about her. They call her immodest, even immoral. They say her Aquitanian ladies are too free with their affections, too bold in their speech. They disapprove of the poetry and music that echoes through Eleanor's chambers. Songs of romantic love that seem inappropriate, even scandalous, to their more austere sensibilities. But they also envy her. Envy her wealth, her beauty, her confidence. Envy the light and color and life she brings to the dark palace. Louis, for his part, is completely overwhelmed by his new wife. She is everything he is not, bold where he is timid, worldly where he is naive, passionate where he is reserved. In the beginning, he is infatuated with her. How could he not be? She is beautiful and exotic, and she represents a wider world than the one he has known. But he also feels inadequate next to her. His religious upbringing has left him uncertain about physical pleasure, uncomfortable with the sensuality that Eleanor brings naturally to their relationship. Only a few months after the wedding, Louis VI dies suddenly. At 16 years old, Louis VII becomes King of France, and Eleanor becomes Queen. It happens so quickly. One day they are prince and princess, newly married, still learning about each other. The next, they wear crowns and make decisions that affect thousands of lives. The coronation takes place in Reims Cathedral, as is tradition. The great Gothic building soars upward, its vaulted ceiling seeming to reach toward heaven itself. Light pours through the famous stained glass windows, casting colored shadows that dance and shift as clouds pass outside. The ceremony is long, heavy with symbolism and tradition. Louis is anointed with holy oil, investing him with the sacred character of kingship. Eleanor, too, is crowned and anointed. Suger is wise in many ways, but he is also conservative, suspicious of Eleanor's influence, concerned that she will lead the young king astray with her secular, pleasure-loving Aquitanian ways. Let us pause here and breathe deeply. Feel your body relaxing into comfort, your mind growing quiet and still. There is no need to remember all these names and dates. Just let the story wash over you like a gentle stream, carrying away the concerns of the day. Eleanor tries to find her place in this new world. She fulfills her ceremonial duties, appearing at court functions, hosting visitors, managing the royal household. She tries to exert influence on policy, particularly regarding her own lands in Aquitaine, but she is often overruled or ignored. She's young, still only 15 when she becomes queen, and the older men who advise Louis see her as a girl, however intelligent and capable she might be. To occupy herself, Eleanor creates her own court within the larger royal court. She gathers around her other young people, poets and musicians, ladies and knights. In her chambers, a different culture flourishes. Troubadours sing the new songs of courtly love, romantic ballads that tell of knights performing brave deeds to win the favor of their ladies. These songs come from Eleanor's native south, where the tradition is well established. And she is determined to bring this civilizing influence to the rougher north. The concept of courtly love is complex and fascinating. It represents a new way of thinking about the relationship between men and women, at least within the aristocratic class. In courtly love, the lady is elevated, placed on a pedestal, worshipped from afar. The knight or troubadour dedicates himself to her service, performs brave deeds in her honor, writes poems celebrating her beauty and virtue. The love is often unconsummated, even deliberately so, for it is the longing itself that is celebrated, the exquisite pain of loving someone unattainable. This might seem strange to us now. Why celebrate unfulfilled love? But in the context of the 12th century, courtly love represented something revolutionary. Marriage among the nobility was purely political. Matches were made for power and alliances, with little regard for affection or compatibility. Courtly love created a space, at least in imagination, where love could exist for its own sake, where women could be valued for their own qualities rather than just for their property and their ability to produce heirs. It gave women power of a sort, making them the center of attention, the object of devotion. Of course, it was all highly formalized, governed by elaborate rules. A knight might declare his love for a married lady, might wear her colors in tournaments, might dedicate poems to her. But if he actually consummated that love, he broke the rules of the game. The whole system existed in a space between fantasy and reality, and part of its appeal was precisely that tension, that balance between desire and restraint. Eleanor understood all of this intuitively. She had grown up in the culture that invented it, and she used it skillfully at the French court, creating an atmosphere of refinement and culture that had not existed there before. Under her influence, the French court became more sophisticated. Knights began to model themselves on the ideals of courtly love, becoming more polished, more literary, more concerned with manners and grace. The brutal warrior culture of the early Middle Ages began to soften, at least on the surface, into something more subtle and complex. But this cultural flowering exists alongside growing tensions in Eleanor and Louis's marriage. By 1145, 8 years into their marriage, Eleanor has given birth to 2 daughters, but no son. In the 12th century, this is a serious problem. The succession must pass to a male heir, or so everyone believes. Without a son, Louis's throne is not secure. Whispers begin to circulate. Perhaps the marriage is cursed. Perhaps it should never have taken place. The tensions escalate in 1145 when Eleanor and Louis make a disastrous trip to Aquitaine. There is trouble in one of Eleanor's cities, Toulouse, and Louis decides to assert his authority by force. The campaign goes badly. Louis, still not a natural military leader despite years of training, makes mistakes. Resources are wasted. Men are lost. And then things get worse. In the town of Vitry-en-Perthois, Louis's army encounters resistance. In his frustration and anger, Louis orders his men to set fire to the town. The fire spreads quickly through the wooden buildings. People flee to the church, seeking sanctuary, but the fire follows them. The church itself catches fire. More than 1,000 people, perhaps 1,300, die there, burned alive while seeking refuge in God's house. The news spreads quickly through France and beyond. Louis is horrified by what he has done. His religious upbringing makes the sin of it unbearable. He has committed mass murder. He has violated the sanctuary of the church. He has killed innocents, including women and children. The weight of this guilt will haunt him for the rest of his life. Eleanor, too, is affected by the tragedy at Vitry, though in a different way. She sees in Louis's guilt-racked response a man who is not fit to be king, at least not the kind of king France needs. A king must be able to make hard decisions, must be able to act decisively even when the consequences are terrible. Louis, in contrast, becomes paralyzed by his guilt. He withdraws into prayer and penance, neglecting his royal duties. The church imposes harsh penance on him, and he accepts it eagerly, almost gratefully, as though suffering might somehow redeem what he has done. During this dark period, a new voice emerges at court. Bernard of Clairvaux is a Cistercian abbot, a mystic and theologian of great influence. He is a charismatic preacher, known for his passionate sermons and his austere piety. He has been critical of the worldly pleasures of the nobility, particularly critical of the courtly love culture that Eleanor has promoted. In Bernard's view, such entertainments are sinful distractions from the proper Christian duty of prayer and contemplation. When Bernard hears about the tragedy at Vitry, he sees it as divine punishment for Louis's sins, particularly his marriage to Eleanor. Bernard begins to suggest that the marriage itself might be the problem. Eleanor and Louis are distantly related, fourth cousins sharing a common ancestor. The Church often uses such consanguinity as grounds for annulment when it is politically convenient. Bernard suggests that Louis consider whether his childless state, his military failures, and the horror at Vitry might all be signs that God disapproves of his marriage. Eleanor, for her part, is frustrated beyond measure. She has been married to Louis for 8 years, has given him 2 healthy daughters, has tried to civilize his rough court, and now she is being blamed for his failures and his guilt. She begins to think seriously about annulment herself, not because of Bernard's religious arguments, but because she has come to see that she and Louis are fundamentally incompatible. But before we follow this path further, let us pause and breathe deeply once more. Let the tensions and conflicts of the story float away like clouds across a summer sky. Relax your shoulders, unclench your jaw. Let your hands rest gently at your sides. There is no hurry. The past is past, and we are simply observers watching from a comfortable distance. In 1146, Pope Eugene III calls for a second crusade. The first crusade, 50 years earlier, had succeeded in capturing Jerusalem and establishing Christian kingdoms in the Holy Land. But now, those kingdoms are under threat from Muslim forces. The city of Edessa has fallen. The Pope calls on Christian Europe to take up arms and defend the holy places. Bernard of Clairvaux becomes the chief preacher of the crusade, traveling throughout France and beyond, giving passionate sermons that inspire thousands to take up the cross. His oratory is legendary. He speaks with such conviction, such apparent divine inspiration, that people are moved to tears, driven to immediate action. Nobles and peasants alike pledged to go on crusade, to fight for God in the distant east. Louis, still racked with guilt over victory, sees the crusade as a chance for redemption. If he goes to the Holy Land, if he fights for Christ, perhaps he can atone for the terrible sin he has committed. Perhaps God will forgive him. He announces his intention to go on crusade, and the court erupts in a mixture of excitement and concern. And then Eleanor makes an announcement that shocks everyone. She too will go on crusade. She will bring her own army from Aquitaine, her own knights and soldiers. She will not stay home like a proper wife, praying for her husband's safe return. She will go with him, will participate in the great adventure. The reaction is swift and negative, especially from Bernard of Clairvaux. Women should not go on crusade, he thunders from pulpits. Their place is at home, in prayer, not in the rough, masculine world of military campaigns. Eleanor is setting a bad example, encouraging other women to leave their proper sphere. She is being immodest, unseemly, unwomanly. But Eleanor is not the only woman who wants to go. Many other noble ladies announce their intention to accompany their husbands. Some bring their own retinues, their own resources. The crusade becomes a massive undertaking, with thousands of people preparing to make the long journey to the east. It will take them through Germany, through Hungary, through the Byzantine Empire, and finally into the Holy Land itself. The journey alone will take months, perhaps years. Many will never return. The preparations take over a year. Supplies must be gathered, armies assembled, arrangements made for the governance of France in the king's absence. Abbot Suger, now an old man, will serve as regent, managing the kingdom while Louis is away. Eleanor makes her own preparations, ensuring that her Aquitanian forces are well equipped, her finances in order. Finally, in the summer of 1147, the Great Crusade departs. It is both magnificent and foolish. Enormous outpouring of religious enthusiasm combined with poor planning and muddled objectives. The French forces number in the tens of thousands, but they lack proper organization, proper supplies, proper leadership. Louis is no military genius, and his spiritual advisors are no help in practical matters of strategy and logistics. The journey through Germany and Hungary is relatively peaceful. The local rulers, themselves Christians, allow the Crusaders to pass through their lands, though not without tension. Feeding and housing such a massive army is a burden on every region. Everything changes when they enter Byzantine territory. The Byzantine Empire, based in Constantinople, is Christian but follows the Eastern Orthodox tradition rather than the Roman Catholic one. Over the centuries, the two branches of Christianity have grown apart, developing different theologies, different rituals, different attitudes. There is suspicion and hostility between them, barely masked by diplomatic courtesy. The Byzantine Emperor, Manuel Comnenus, let your breathing deepen now, in through your nose, out through your mouth. Feel yourself sinking deeper into relaxation, into comfort. The story continues, but you need not hold on to every detail. Just let it flow over you like water. like wind through tall grass. The Crusaders cross into Asia Minor, what is now Turkey, in the autumn of 1147. The landscape changes dramatically. Behind them are the green hills and fertile valleys of Europe. Ahead lies a harsh, dry land of mountains and plateaus, beautiful in its own way, but unforgiving to an army used to the mild climate of France. And it is here that disaster begins to unfold. The Crusaders are attacked by Turkish forces, swift horsemen who use hit-and-run tactics that the heavily armored French knights are ill-equipped to counter. The Turks sweep in, fire arrows, and retreat before the Crusaders can respond. Supply trains are captured. Stragglers are picked off. The army begins to suffer from hunger and thirst. Eleanor rides with the army, and she is no mere decorative figure. She wears armor, practices with weapons, involves herself in strategy discussions. Her Aquitanian forces are among the best disciplined and best supplied in the entire crusade, but even they suffer in the harsh conditions. At Cadmus Mountain, the crusade nearly ends in complete disaster. The army is crossing the mountain in a long column when Turkish forces attack. The front of the column, where Louis rides, pushes forward, but the rear, where Eleanor and her Aquitanians are positioned, is cut off. In the chaos and confusion, many are killed. Supply wagons are lost. For several terrifying hours, it seems that Eleanor herself might be captured or killed. But the Aquitanians hold their position, fighting with skill and discipline until the Turkish forces withdraw. Eleanor emerges from the battle unharmed, but deeply angry. She believes that Louis's poor leadership nearly got her killed, nearly resulted in the destruction of her own forces. The rift between them widens. The remains of the Crusader army limp onward, eventually reaching the Mediterranean coast and the relative safety of the Crusader kingdoms. They have been decimated by battle, disease, and desertion. What began as a mighty host has been reduced to a fraction of its original size. The Great Second Crusade has already failed before it even attempts its main objective. In Antioch, one of the Crusader kingdoms, Eleanor encounters her uncle, Raymond of Poitiers. Raymond is the Prince of Antioch, a cultured and sophisticated man who shares Eleanor's Aquitanian background. After months of hardship and danger, Eleanor finds in Antioch a familiar culture, people who speak her language, who understand her perspective. She relaxes, enjoys herself, spends long hours in conversation with Raymond about politics and strategy. And here the whispers begin. Eleanor and Raymond spend much time together, perhaps too much time. They confer in private about military strategy. They walk together in the gardens. They laugh and talk like old friends, or perhaps like something more. The gossip spreads quickly through the camp. Some say Eleanor is having an affair with her own uncle. Others defend her, saying the closeness is natural given their family relationship and shared background. But the scandal is born. But Louis, influenced by his religious advisors, was determined to continue to Jerusalem to fulfill his crusading vow. and he was jealous and suspicious of Eleanor's relationship with Raymond. The tension between them exploded into open conflict. Eleanor declared that she wanted an annulment of their marriage, citing the consanguinity that Bernard of Clairvaux had mentioned years before. Louis, enraged and humiliated, refused. More than that, he had Eleanor placed under guard and forcibly removed from Antioch. He essentially abducted his own wife, taking her away from her uncle and her Aquitanian followers. This moment marks the true end of their marriage, though they will remain legally married for a few more years. The love, or at least affection, that might have existed between them is gone, replaced by anger and resentment on both sides. Eleanor has been humiliated, treated like a wayward child rather than a queen. Louis has been publicly embarrassed, his wife having declared openly that she wishes to leave him. The Crusaders continue to Jerusalem, but they accomplish nothing of military value. An attack on Damascus, poorly planned and worse executed, ends in failure and retreat. The Second Crusade is a complete disaster. Thousands have died for nothing. The Muslim forces in the region are actually in 1149. Eleanor and Louis returned to Europe by ship, sailing from Acre to Italy. They travel separately, barely speaking to each other. The journey home is somber, marked by failure and mutual recrimination. Both are exhausted, disillusioned, eager to be done with each other. But there is one more complication. In Italy, Pope Eugene III intervenes. He has heard about the troubles between Louis and Eleanor, about Eleanor's request for an annulment. The Pope, for his own political reasons, does not want to see the marriage end. The alliance between France and Aquitaine is too valuable. He meets with Louis and Eleanor separately, then together, and he uses all his persuasive power to convince them to reconcile. The Pope even has their separate sleeping chambers redesigned into one shared chamber, literally putting them in the same bed, as if physical proximity might rekindle their affection. It is absurd and heavy-handed, but it works, at least temporarily. Eleanor and Louis agree to try again, to give their marriage another chance. They return to Paris together, and within months, Eleanor is pregnant again. In 1150, she gives birth to another daughter, Alex. Still no son. The French court whispers that the marriage is cursed, that God will never grant them a male heir. The relationship between Eleanor and Louis remains cold, formal, devoid of real affection. They are going through the motions, fulfilling their duties, but both know that the marriage cannot last. Let us leave them there for the moment, trapped in a loveless marriage, bound by politics and papal decree. Let your mind drift now, releasing these stories of conflict and frustration. Imagine instead cool stone halls at twilight, gardens peaceful in the evening breeze, the gentle splash of fountains. Rest, and let sleep come softly, gently, like a blessing.